This is the Wandering Mike.
Welcome everyone to the Wandering Mike. Today I'm here with James. Hey James, how you doing?
Hey, dude. Yeah, I'm good. How you doing?
Pretty good. It's a nice day so far, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. I think it's going to be a very nice and interesting one. So yeah, um, so if you want to get us started and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your life, your journey, anything you want to share.
Sure. Yeah, cheers, dude. Appreciate you inviting me on. So I'm James. I am originally from the UK, from Norwich, and now I live in Vancouver in Canada. It's very sunny today, which is a rarity in winter.
Nice.
And yeah, my short backstory is I grew up not interested in travel at all. Went to Australia in 2010 to watch cricket. That ignited some wanderlust, and then I was at university in London doing music. So I finished that, but kind of switched off from the degree because I wanted to go traveling. So 2013, quite quickly after I graduated, I went off on a 2 year trip. And ever since then, it's kind of been traveling for, I guess that's like mm, 11, 12 years ish. And I haven't really stopped since. I've worked in a few countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and I think I've traveled to around, I don't know, 70 countries, something like that. And now I have a travel podcast called the Wingin Travel Podcast, which is a bit like this one where I interview guests about their travels and their life story, but also I share my own travels alongside that. And right now, just went to Central America for a month in November and UK in December for Christmas. So now I'm producing my podcast episodes for those trips. And yeah, just into 2025, I think we're in now, aren't we? So yeah, new year, new start, and looking forward to cracking on.
Very nice. So yeah, I'm gonna ask you about a couple of the things that you just mentioned. But maybe it's a nice way to start it off chronologically. So you said that that trip to Australia kind of sparked it all, and then you went off from London to a 2 year trip. So that sounds quite long. If people say they want to go and travel for a bit, 2 years quite long. So take us back to that moment. Take us back into how that formed and how your decision was made to travel for that amount of time.
Yeah, they are linked. So in 2010, I was watching the cricket in Australia, and I couldn't really believe a place like Australia existed. And I remember speaking to a guy at the cricket. He was sat in front of us, and his dad was from England, but he is Australian because he was born there. And this was in Perth, and he was just explaining that if you're between the ages of 18 to 30, which now it's 35 because they changed the rules, in UK you can just get a work permit to go and live in Australia for 2 years or a year. I was like, oh, okay. So I kind of got this information from him, kept it in my head, and when I got back to UK after that trip, I'd done some research. So, oh, you can do that. It's an easy application. Well, I want to go back, so I planned to finish my degree. So I graduated in 2012, and I was like, okay, well, between now and maybe January 2013, it's like well, that's 2 years, I guess. At that point, I'm going to save as much money as possible, and I'm going to go traveling in January 2013. So that was the rule. And then in the meantime, I've got a few jobs, saved as much as I could. And my friend from university was interested in going as well. So we planned to go to Asia for 3 months in January 2013. And that was Southeast Asia. Then we went to Fiji and New Zealand and then Australia. And he left after 6 months and I stayed for another year. And after Australia, I was like, oh, well, on the way back to UK, I want to go to Central and South America. I actually went to South America for 2 months, and then I went to Caribbean for maybe a month. Yeah, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. I went to New York, Iceland, and then home. And that was pretty much 2 years to the day. And yeah, an incredible trip, lots of experiences, stories, met loads of people. Yeah, and that kind of really satisfied that hunger to travel again, and also to not travel for a while because I thought, 2 years is quite a long time. So I thought I'd stay
Yeah,
in UK for a bit before the next trip, and that's kind of what happened.
right. So, um, I actually want to ask you about some of the locations that you visited as well. Some of them quite selfishly, as well, because it's places I'm planning to go to in the future. But before I do that, and I tell you a little bit about where I'm planning to go,
Yeah,
um, from the way you told the story, it sounded like it was a nice easing into traveling as well, having that mate of yours that joined you for the first like half a year, and then you were off
yeah,
on your own. Maybe for people that um, also have never traveled alone, or maybe just very briefly, how was that part of the experience for you? Because it is a totally different thing to be traveling alone rather than working in a place alone. A place where you have a
mm,
home and you just move to. Maybe you do move to another city, but you have a home and you stay there for a while and you work. But then solo traveling. So um, that being your first time, can you take us back to that as well?
yeah. So the solo travel portion was after Australia because obviously I worked for my work visa as a solo person in Australia, but because you get a job, I don't think it's the same sort of experience
Right.
because you're fairly grounded, right? So I had 6 months in Melbourne and 6 months in Southwest Australia called Margaret River, where it's essentially like any normal person working. I just lived there, got a job, saved money. I did live at a hostel though, so that was a different vibe. So for each place, I was living at a
Right.
hostel, and in hostels you have like the short termers who just stay and go, and then you have the long termers who have probably got jobs and they're just living there. And that's me for pretty much all of Australia. So that was a great experience. Earned some good money, saved some money. The real travel portion was after that. So I went to Hawaii solo for 2.5 weeks after Australia. And then I went to South America, and most of that was solo, apart from the World Cup in 2014 with my friends. So yeah, that
Mm,
was an interesting time because it was the first time traveling solo, and there was ups and downs. I think I met people in every country, but where I was probably the most loneliest probably was in the Caribbean because it was low
mm,
season and it's not really like a backpacking destination. Like I didn't meet anyone. Like on Antigua, I
right.
literally felt like I was the only tourist who wasn't on a cruise ship. I had a car, I was driving around, going to these beaches which are all public, going to these viewpoints, and there's no one there. It's quite incredible. This would have been like July or August. Um, yeah, so no one in my hotel. Felt like I was on my own. So I think you need to be comfortable traveling on your own because you're gonna have periods of time where you see no one, speak to no one. And even back then, there wasn't as much entertainment on your own. Now we have like smartphones or Kindles, for example, or
Mm,
even Spotify is big now, and they were there at that point, but not like huge. So I'd never really thought at that time I had enough stuff to do on my own. I wasn't like reading books on the beach because I didn't have a Kindle at that point, but didn't exist. I had Spotify on my iPhone 5C, so I had that. That was good enough, but I had no opportunity to watch films or watch TVs. I didn't really do much in my downtimes. That was quite an interesting, um, yeah, part of that trip. But on the whole, you do meet people if you're staying in hostels. So it may be a solo trip, but in Bolivia, I met someone every place I stayed at for 3.5 weeks. So you do meet people and you join tour groups or you join experiences or activities, and you're not really on your own. So it felt kind of cool to have that flexibility to go to that place one day or move somewhere else.
yeah. Um, that seems to be a recurring theme as well, with a lot of people that I talk to, and also obviously something for me in my earlier traveling journey, just being comfortable, being alone, and being with yourself. Um, because now to me, it kind of sounded very nice in a way as well. You being on this Caribbean island, being all by yourself.
Yeah,
It seems like it has a good part to it as well, especially
yeah,
having been to hostels and having talked with people every day. And then, but you need to be comfortable to enjoy it. Otherwise, you
sure.
you won't enjoy it to that extent. Um, so yeah, let me basically get into the questions that I wanted to ask you. So, I'm actually at the moment doing something similar, or pretty equal to what you described. So I'm here in New Zealand, on my working holiday visa,
Hmm.
which will expire in little less than 2 weeks. So after
Oh
that, I'm
wow,
gonna
okay.
go to so I'll go to Australia, actually, to do the same thing there. So I'm gonna do my
Hmm.
working holiday visa in Australia, and after that, which was the primary reason for me to start traveling again, I want to go to South and Central America. So I'm
Mm,
currently learning Spanish, and
okay.
I definitely want to go to there. So, yeah, when you said South America and you said you just spent a month in Central America, I
Mm,
definitely need to ask you about that more. I have a couple of countries on my list that I personally really want to see, but I just broadly want to ask you first, and maybe share your most exciting experiences, the places you loved there the most. What did you enjoy about South and Central America?
yeah, so let's do South America first. That's like back in 2014. I think I liked. It was actually a pretty cool trip because it felt like one experience after another. There's certain trails you can do in terms of like where you go. So it all depends how much time you have, and obviously what interests you have. But I kind of went from Rio in Brazil to the Iguazu Falls, and I hung around the northern part of Argentina and made my way to northern Chile to do the Atacama Desert, which then turned into the salt flats. You go across the border, and then I crossed the border into Bolivia, and I spent 3 weeks in Bolivia. I think it's one of the cheapest places in South America, so I thought I'd stay there for a bit.
Mm.
And that I'll come to Bolivia in a second. That was incredible. And then I went into Peru to do the Inca Trail and I finished in Lima and then flew out. So I think that trail took me 2 months, maybe 2.5 months, and that was fairly quick going. But I did spend a lot of time in Bolivia because there's so many different experiences in Bolivia. Like I mentioned, the salt flats are incredible in the west. In the east, you've got the Amazon, which I didn't do, but it's the most accessible and cheapest place to do the Amazon rainforest. So
Mm.
that's an option if you go to Bolivia. I went to La Paz and did Death Road, bikes down Death Road. That's incredible. And then I went to Sucre to look at the old colonial white buildings and do the markets there. That's a pretty cool place to hang out. And then I went to Potosi to do a salt no, a silver mine tour, which looking
Mm.
back, is that eco-friendly? Not sure. Is it sustainable? Not sure. But you can go and visit a local working mine. It's been there for 500 years. And that
Oh.
tour is a bit hairy because you're climbing ladders in pitch dark with helmets on in a working mine. So you hear like these explosions going on. And it lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's pretty cool and exciting. And the weird part with that is you can go to a market and buy gifts for the miners. And at this market, you can buy like children's books, cocoa leaves, dynamite, chocolate or sweets. It could be any like type of tool they might need. So I decided to buy dynamite, children's books, and cocoa leaves. And you just walk past the miners in the mine and just give it to them, and they, like, say thank you, and yeah, that's a cool experience. Yeah, and I think as a whole that I could have stayed there longer and probably gone to the east part to go to either Cochabamba or Santa Cruz and do the Amazon, which is on my list. So that could have been another week and that could have been a month there. But yeah, lots of experiences, met loads of people, like an incredible country in the middle of South America. So that's pretty cool. Do you want me to go
Yeah,
to Central America or do you want to ask questions about that?
yeah. Let's stick here for a second,
Yeah.
because Bolivia actually wasn't on my list,
Oh,
but it sounds like it definitely should be. It makes sense with the trail you described as well, because all the other countries were on my list. Especially also because I met people here, and also in Portugal I met people. That's where I was working before I came
yeah.
here to New Zealand, and so I have friends that I'm gonna visit in Brazil. I have friends in
Mm,
Argentina and Chile, and Peru. Basically, just not just, but it was on the list because of Machu Picchu, and
sure.
obviously I heard good things about the Peruvian people and the Peruvian cuisine as well. Um, but yeah, Bolivia kind of snuck under my radar. So I appreciate you sharing those stories as well, and it sounds like a place I definitely, um, yeah, like that I should definitely have on there. But yeah, you said you did the Inca Trail in Peru.
Mm.
How stunning was that?
Yeah, you got a choice. You can either do the 4-day hike or you go and do the day trip from Aguas Calientes. I decided to do the hike, and that was tough. I'm not a hiker,
Mm,
but I think that's the hardest one I've done so far, and I've done a few. So I think if you can
right.
get through the hardship of day 2, which is like an incredibly hard day, it it really is worth it because you get access to Machu Picchu before the day trippers. So you can
Mm,
get to the gate opens at 6 or 6:30 a.m. and all the hikers who have been hiking are queuing up to go in, and it's not crazy with people because it's just the hikers, and you get to see Machu Picchu pretty much with no tourists there, alone in its glory, right? And then you get access to go and walk around it once people get their photos from the viewpoint, and you get that probably for 1 or 2 hours before the day trippers start coming up. So I would recommend the hike just for getting the feel of Machu Picchu in quieter times before the day trippers come up on the buses. But when you first see it, it's incredible. It's unlike anything I've seen, especially when you've completed like a tough hike, when you're completely tired, you're knackered, you haven't showered for 4 days, you've eaten well, but you're just tired, right? So it's just a sense of achievement. And what's really nice is when you go back down to the town to Aguas Calientes on these hikes, they probably finish with a buffet, and you say goodbye to
mm,
your guides. You probably tip them as well, and then you get to go on a train ride back to Cusco. It's a slow train, but you just get to sit there with your feet up and reflect on your trip. It's a pretty cool experience. So Machu Picchu is 100% worth it. I know it's cliche and people say it all the time, but
mm,
it is that incredible. You got to go. Yeah.
right. Yeah, that definitely sounds like, yeah, I'm gonna do the hike because I feel like, um, I mean, not that it ruins it, because I mean, obviously we're tourists there too, but if you
Yeah,
get
sure.
the chance to see it in a more calm way
Mm,
and not that crowded with people, why not take it? You know, you're probably not gonna be there that many times, so you might as well
yeah.
make the best of when you're actually there.
And I think also,
Um,
just to finish on Machu Picchu for the hike, I think this was 10 years ago. So this could be
right.
slightly outdated, but maybe not. I think you do need to book in advance. I think if you're looking to book in sort of a hiking season or good weather, uh, I did book. I think I booked in the January, ready for the July. I was in Australia at that point, right? So I booked
Mm.
Yeah, I think it was January. So I booked 6, 7 months in advance. So I would recommend anyone listening or who are thinking about doing it to look into that and make sure you get something booked in if you know what time you're gonna be there.
Right. Um, n- just a little bit of a more general question about the whole trip as well. Um, because I've talked with a lot of people, well, a bunch of people now, that have been to South America, and they all kind of tell me how what great of a time they had. But some
Mhm.
people also um, tell me that they felt unsafe at certain points
Oh.
of their travel, and it's an interesting one because the people that I met here, that are like from Brazil, that are from Argentina, from Chile, um, actually go kind of in the same direction, because the thing that they tell me that they love about New Zealand is when they arrived here, they felt safe. And that
Mhm.
actually was quite impactful to me, hearing their stories about how it was so foreign to them, that feeling of, being safe.
Mhm.
My Brazilian friend, he was saying how people on the street were just walking and looking on their phone, and he was like thinking, "What are you guys doing?" So, um, I had relatively profound conversations with my South American friends about that, and basically always said, "Well, Mike, you definitely need to go to these places. Maybe even just to also experience that feeling in a way if you have never experienced that." But yeah, I kind of wanted to hear your opinion on that topic as well.
Yeah, I think Latin America is kinda known for being a bit edgy. I think you can't fully relax, maybe. And so there is some obviously locals know better than tourists, but it's a weird one, right? Because tourists kinda get, I wouldn't say a free pass, but I don't know, they're kinda left alone to the major stuff. You might be experiencing pickpocketing or some theft, which is not great, but, the kinda there's a rule, it's like an unwritten rule really, you kinda leave them alone, right? So I never really felt
Mhm.
totally unsafe, but I did feel edgy in some parts, like Sao Paulo, I felt edgy. I think in La Paz in Bolivia, you probably need to be just aware, especially taxi drivers as well. Um, but places like Cusco, I felt totally safe. It's a tourist town though. Lima, I
Mhm.
didn't feel particularly. It's okay if you go to like Miras Flores, but other places I'm not sure. So I think you just need to be aware where you're staying and where you're walking. And interestingly, I went to Central America in November, and El Salvador is probably the most safest country I've felt out of anywhere in Latin America. So that's an
Mhm.
interesting conversation because they were not that safe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, right? So uh, even experienced travelers I met in El Salvador who have been to a lot more countries than I have in Latin America were saying that, like San Salvador, for example, is totally safe and no qualms walking around at night compared to a lot of other places in Central or South America. So yeah, I think it depends on the experience, right? And I think that your Brazilian guy, obviously he knows better for Brazil, but in Rio, I think you can just be uh, a little bit more careful just where you're walking into, what areas. Because I was part of the World Cup, maybe it's not as bad, maybe it's more well policed, and we got away with like just wandering around into certain areas. But maybe in normal times, I'm not sure how safe that is. So yeah, I think it's just taking precautions and maybe walking in groups probably would help as well. Maybe walking around on your own be a bit more careful, but isn't that the same
Right.
everywhere? I'm not sure. But because I've lived in New Zealand, I know where your friends are coming from because that totally is safe, in my opinion. Like that is like a sanctuary, almost
Yeah.
like Canada to an extent. But then I would say London's dangerous, so people would probably laugh at that. But that's because I'm sort of half from UK and I lived there. So yeah, that's probably sounds a bit stupid compared to someone who's from Brazil who's saying that don't walk around in the favelas, right? I don't know, different places.
But I totally get what you mean as well, because, um, that's what, like, everyone sees New Zealand and you just see how safe of a country it is.
Mm,
Um, but then coming from like Brazil, it might just be even bigger of a contrast. But
yeah.
yeah, New Zealand just yeah is a really safe country where you can basically, because you forget, or I forget sometimes, that it is just an island, you know. So I
Mm,
feel like the island vibe really comes in there as well, and they just don't
yeah.
have too much to worry about. But then again, so is the UK, right? So um,
Much busier.
yeah, yeah. Um, so before we actually go to Central America, I can't brush over the fact that you've been mentioning twice now that you've been there for the World Cup, and
Yeah.
I have been working in Portugal. I'm here now in New Zealand, but I'm originally from Germany, born and raised. So the 2014 World Cup definitely means something to German people.
Sure.
So I have to ask you about that. Did you see any games? How was the atmosphere? What did you experience during the World Cup there?
Yeah, I went to 6 games, maybe 5 or
Oh,
6.
cool.
What ones did I see? I saw the England. Unfortunately, I saw the 2 group games for England that were against Uruguay, where they knocked us out in Sao Paulo. I was there when Luis Suarez scored. That was not the best game I've seen, and unfortunately, because we got knocked out effectively on that game, I went to Belo Horizonte to see us play Costa Rica. That was 0-0, probably the worst game I've ever seen. From England's point of view, it's awful. It's turgid.
Mm.
But I did manage to see some other games. So I saw Messi score in the Maracanã against Serbia. Was that Serbia? Or was it who does Edin Dzeko play for? Uh,
Uh,
is it
yeah, I
Serbia?
think it, yeah, I think so.
I think it's Serbia. I was at the end when he dribbled around the edge area and scored a goal. I was at that end. There's like 10 Serbia fans and the rest were Argentinians, and that was an incredible atmosphere. Probably the highlight of me watching football. So I saw that game, and I feel like I saw a few more um, in different areas. So an amazing experience. Maracana was on my sort of bucket list to go and visit. I think seeing Messi score there in the height of his like
Wow.
powers is probably a thing that can't be um, overtaken. I don't think I can't see a better thing than that. And it's just a normal fact that England do badly. What was really interesting with you being from Germany is that I was in where was I in for the 7-1? I think I just got to Peru, Chile or Peru, one of the 2. They're different time zones. It must be I reckon it's Peru just before my Inca Trail or after that. But everyone wanted Germany to win in South America. So
Oh,
we
really?
met we met Argentinians, Chileans, all the other countries were rooting for Germany, not Brazil. So that was
Right.
quite an interesting dynamic as well. And then I think Brazil was in like a state of shock and mourning after that result,
Mm.
right? I think the papers were just had the just had the black canvas and that was it. Like there's nothing to be said. So I think the country was in a bit of shock. And I remember watching. I think I was in Chile when I was watching the final, so it must have been Chile, Germany versus Argentina. But yeah, that was incredible experience. Yeah, the fan zones on the beach were great, like on Copacabana Beach. Um, Always an activity going on, lots of fans about. I didn't see any trouble or feel unsafe. Yeah, it's a great experience in my book.
Yeah, I feel like there's not many, except maybe for some places in Europe, including England, maybe including Germany, but there's not a lot of places in this world that are so perfect for World Cup, you know, where a country just loves football and
Yeah,
everyone kind of shares that excitement. I feel like Brazil is one of the best places for something like that. And to be around while it's going on must have been phenomenal.
yeah, incredible experience, and I don't think it'll be topped.
Um, So yeah, if we now just wanna transition to Central America, and
Mm.
maybe you can tell us some stories about the places you've seen there.
Yeah, so I went to Central America mainland. So I obviously went to like it's not part of Central America, but I went to Caribbean right back in 2014. But I always
Mm.
had an itch to go to Central America. So last year in November, I went for a month and I decided to fly into San Salvador in El Salvador and then spend 10, 12 days there and then make my way over the border to Guatemala. And then I stayed there for
Mhm.
10 days or so and then made my way over the border to Mexico and finished in Mexico City. So I had, yeah, exactly a month and incredible trip. A different trip, it's 10 years later from being back in Latin America, so it's a long time coming. But El Salvador is an interesting place to go to because it's now safe and it's still in that transition phase from being like newly free from civil war and gangs to now building up tourism infrastructure or activities or places to see and do. So it's in this weird transition right now where it's cheap. Things are being built, but it's still enough to go and see and do for 10, 12 days. And it's totally safe, easy to travel around on the bus. The people are so nice. Never had any problems. Felt totally safe, and I had a really awesome time. Just seeing some volcanoes, some beaches, some beach towns, some colonial towns. I did a Civil War tour in Suchitoto. That was pretty cool. San Salvador's a great city to be based in first, and Santa Ana is the second city, which you can do the Santa Ana volcano. And yeah, it's just an incredible experience. And then you go over the border to Guatemala, and it's fairly similar, similar people, but bit more um, experience in travel and tourism. That things have been there for ages. It's been written about quite a lot. You can go and see and do things that you can probably read about or hear about on podcasts or blogs. So I trekked up the Acatenango volcano in Antigua. Stayed in Antigua for 3 or 4 days. Then went to Tikal to mine ruins, and then I also went to Lake Atislan as well and stayed there for a few days. So that's pretty cool. And the highlight was definitely the volcano hike. So Fuego
Mhm.
volcano is one of the most active volcanoes in the world. You can go and hike to. It's about 30 to 50 US dollars, depending who you go with, and you hike up 4 to 6 hours, stay the night, and you can do an extra hike to get closer to the volcano, or you can just stay on base camp and then you stay the night, get some amazing views, amazing sunrises, and then walk back down the next day. Incredible experience. So, and then Takao was equally experienced because the mine ruins are incredible there. Probably arguably the best you can go and see because you can
Mhm.
climb on some of them, and it's not too busy
Okay.
as a place to visit. And I would just recommend staying there for a few days, walking around. It's pretty incredible. Oh, and then Mexico,
Right.
I just stayed in Oaxaca because I wanted to go and eat some good food. So I had some really nice days in Oaxaca in the sunshine, drinking coffee, eating some good local food. That was a highlight as well.
Mm. Nice. Yeah, Guatemala. I I've heard a lot of stories as well already, and yeah, the volcano that you said that you talked about as well. I think is the one that a lot of people do while they're there.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, Guatemala definitely on my radar, and I I actually frankly have no idea where El Salvador is even located, but I have heard for some reason, like I've read these stories as well, where it was just said like El Salvador, how safe it is and how safe it has become. Like I've read these stories, so I've heard
yeah,
like the name,
totally
but
true.
uh, yeah, that's really cool. So that seems to be like a really good spot then to visit as well.
Yeah, because El Salvador, as we all know, was the murder capital 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And effectively, what's happened is the president has imprisoned all the gangs. I mean, when you
Mm.
analyze it, is it the right thing to do in terms of what he has done? Probably not. But I think if you speak to the local people, they would accept it because they were just living on edge, like, for years with these gangs,
Mm.
right? So the president has imprisoned, they think, 40 to 50,000 gang members with no trial,
Wow.
and it's in a state of martial
Mm.
law in accordance to those gangs. So they don't have a fair trial, but they've all got tattoos, they're all part of gangs, and of course, there's gonna be a small percentage of those in prison that probably not a part of gangs, and they're probably that's just unfortunate because they're not being able to get out of that. But on the whole, most are gang members, and now it's just completely safe. There's obviously lots of police and military about just to make sure, but effectively, if they see
Mm.
someone with a tattoo, they question them, so you can't really get away with it. Um, and a lot of
Right.
gang members also fled to Honduras, so Honduras is a bit edgy, so I think, it's not quite as safe there, but El Salvador, yeah, totally safe, and the buses run between the towns. It's a small country, it borders Guatemala and Honduras, and budget-wise, super cheap, like $1 buses between towns. Food is like 1 to 2, $3 on the street. Even expensive food is not that expensive, and then the tourist attractions are normally free, and if not, they're probably 1 or $2 to go in. So if you're looking for a budget country, up and coming, safe, lots to see and do, I would recommend it.
Nice. Um, Maybe again a more general question because yeah, you just been there, and the other trip you did, you said was 10 years ago now. Um, so maybe because I am learning Spanish at the moment, did you, because I don't know how your proficiency in Spanish is, did you feel like that is a necessary thing to know the language of Spanish, or did you get around with English with your hands and feet? How do you think, how important is it to know Spanish?
I think it's very important. I learnt Spanish in Bolivia, um,
Mm.
because I quickly realized I don't speak English. So I had to really,
Yeah.
really knuckle down. So I had the basic Spanish from that trip 10 years ago. And then last year, El Salvador, I would say you definitely need Spanish because only the younger population know English because only the last 3 or 4 years that's been put into schools where you have to learn it. So what you find is there's a big library in San Salvador, which is new, and it's next to like their oldest like national palace. So national palace is like 19th century. This library was built 2 years ago in conjunction with the Chinese.
Mm.
Everyone working there is young because they can speak English. Not all of them, but majority. So 60, 70% of people there are youngsters, probably in their like late teenager, early 20s, and they could all speak English because they'd learned it in school. But if you're walking around day to day around the markets, around any other places really, even hostels or hotels, no one speaks English. So you need
Mm.
to know basic Spanish. So I had that just enough to get by. And especially if you're traveling on buses, you're going to need it as well because they stop off in different points and you need to converse with the bus driver to drop you off
Right.
and stop. So yeah, I would recommend it. Guatemala, not so much, but and Mexico, definitely not so much. But places like El Salvador, Bolivia, even parts of Peru, I would learn Spanish.
Very good. Very nice. That keeps me motivated to keep going. Uh, no, because that definitely ties into what my friends from there said as well.
Yeah,
Said like, yeah, you really should know at least the basics. Otherwise, you probably would just feel uncomfortable as well because you can't
yeah,
really communicate yourself in a way that you would wish to.
sure.
Um, yeah, maybe um, we can switch it to another selfish topic. I just love to I just love to hear your stories, and obviously pick your brain a little bit, because I know I'll be going to these places. So, like I've said, in 2 weeks I'll go to Australia,
Yeah.
and I have so I've been to Australia once before, was like 5 or 6 years ago. After because I actually, as part of my studies, got to spend 1 year in Indonesia. And after I finished that year there, had some time before things started back up in Germany. So I took a flight to Melbourne and then traveled up the East Coast for like 3 months. Obviously, not seeing every city there is, but seeing quite a bit off the
Mm.
East Coast. And then spent like 5 or 6 days in Perth. And then I went back to Germany. So I booked my flight here from Queenstown, New Zealand, to Gold Coast actually because I felt like I wanted to go back to Queensland because I just loved the climate there,
Yeah.
which not everyone agrees with, but I just love the tropical climate and I love the beaches. And um, then and yeah, I'm not going to talk about it too much because the podcast listeners probably heard the story like 3 times now. But thankfully, my parents and my sister are actually coming to visit me
Oh,
there as
nice.
well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my sister first and my parents after. So in total, I will actually be vacationing for 7 weeks when I get there. So, because my sister for 3 weeks and then my parents for a month. And obviously, their plan of a vacation is not staying at one place for 3, respectively 4 weeks. So we'd be doing quite a trip,
Sure.
with again, ending with my parents flying from Sydney to Perth and then having a week and a
Yeah.
half in Perth. So, effectively, even though I plan to fly to Queensland, I will end up in Perth, basically after my vacation. So, I heard that you were working in Western Australia, and a lot of my Australian friends as well said, "Well, maybe that's not a bad thing because Western Australia is beautiful." So,
Yeah. Amazing.
I just kind of wanna hear your experiences that you had, and you said Margaret River, was it
Yeah.
where you worked?
Yeah.
So how did you like Western Australia?
I had an interesting time in Western Australia because I worked in Margaret River in the vineyards, and then there wasn't enough work. So I then got a job working in the kitchens on the mine sites in Northwest Australia. So fly in and fly
Mm,
out work. So really, really intense, 2 weeks on, 1 week off work. But my
wow.
first experience was I love Perth. Perth is one of my favorite places, and I've been there a few times. I love the beaches there. I love the little towns on the beach like Cottesloe and Scarborough and Rockingham, and all those beaches are incredible. And I love the city as well. But in Southwest Australia, Margaret River is the wine region. So it's about 3 hours drive south of Perth. And you can be based in Margaret River, the township, or Bustleton, which is like south of the region. And in between those two is vineyards, lots of beaches, uh, places that make chocolate, port, cheese. It's just like one little vineyard or little
Mhm.
town or village after another, and it's an incredible little area. And I'm desperate to go back actually and redo it. But honestly, that time was just work from sunrise to midday, have lunch, go to a beach or another vineyard, and just have like a drink, or go to do a cheese wine tasting, whatever it is, for like 3 or 4 months. That's all it was. Like it's an incredible time with a group at the hostel that I'm still in contact with today. So yeah, that was kind of living in the
Wow.
hostel, beaches. I had a car, driving around, working as much as I could, but also going to the beach as much as I could. And yeah, just an incredible time. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's, because I also feel like everything happens for a reason, so maybe I should, just take that as a sign and, just stay in Western Australia for a bit, because I probably will have, 2 years there as well. I'm definitely planning to extend my visa once I'm there.
Yeah,
And yeah, sadly, I can't do 3 years because I'm already too old. Because everyone
yeah.
that's not from the UK, it's still 30, so I
Okay.
can do my 2 years, and that's it. Um, so yeah, I heard good things about Western Australian beaches, and yeah, maybe I'll just stay
I
there
would get
then.
I'd get a car for Western Australia. That's my biggest tip because
Mm,
Melbourne's got great transport links. Sydney, of course, as well, and Brisbane. But Perth is a sprawling city, so you need a car. And then Margaret River region, because you want to probably visit lots of different vineyards or go to different beaches, you're going to need a car. No public transport down there. You can go between the main road of Margaret River and Bustleton. You can take that road, probably on a bus. But honestly, you want a car to go to random beaches. It's the type of place where you pick a random beach and there's no one there. It's just that sort of
mm,
idyllic small town living and just the nicest people and great climate. It doesn't get too ridiculously hot because Perth can get extremely hot, but you're 3 hours south, so it's not quite as bad. So all year round, I imagine
mm.
it's quite magical. If you love big cities, not the place. But if you love small towns, lots of space, clean air, beaches, just amazing. And you can drive around to the bottom part. I think it's Denmark and down the bottom there as well. So yeah, pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think I'm also not that unhappy if it's a little bit calmer for a while, especially because I'll be doing the 7 weeks road trip with my family anyway.
Yeah,
But I don't know when you've been to New Zealand. I don't know if you've had a chance to go down to Queenstown, where I live at the moment, and
yeah.
it's just a big, busy tourist town. Well, it's not a big town, but it's a very busy town because it is a small town. And right now, middle of January, we're just getting overrun with tourists. So, I can do with some calm.
Yeah, I went there in 2014 on the Kiwi Experience. So I was on the Kiwi Experience bus for 3.5 weeks in New Zealand. I don't know if you know that, the
Sure.
Kiwi Experience, but I think it's still going.
Yeah,
It's
and
a big green bus. Uh, yeah, I've done that for 3.5 weeks. Probably again the most incredible month in New Zealand. Like some of the people were so good and so funny, and some of the nights were incredible. But yeah, Queenstown was a favorite. But that was at the end, effectively, of that Kiwi Experience. So we stayed there for a
mm,
week, and it was busy then, but I've been back since, and it is, yeah, incredibly busy.
yeah. I mean, I love my time here because as you know, it's just so beautiful around, and you have nature like right at your fingertips. Wherever you go outside of town, there's like a bunch of hiking trails that you can do, and the
Yeah,
nature is so amazing. But yeah, the other thing is, as soon as you're in the town, there's just tourists everywhere. Because obviously people wanna go here and experience the nature. Um, so yeah, it's kind of a nice weird mixture of busyness, but then also being so close to nature that
yeah,
it is something magical.
mm, yeah, I did love that place. Yeah, good memories.
Um, and yeah, to your point, I definitely see these Kiwi Experience buses still driving around, and in the hostel. Because on my working holiday, I basically went the route of seeking out hostel work. So I then work in hostels here. And in the hostel I worked for quite some time in Christchurch, we actually had something similar come through. It was called G Adventures.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
just to throw another company in there, and they do something similar. And yeah, they actually part of the itinerary was our hostel, so they stayed
Oh
at
yeah,
our
nice.
hostel. So we always had every week we had this group of travelers coming through, which was also quite nice to
Yeah.
yeah, just talk with them as well, share experiences, learn of what they did on their experience so far, and it's a cool way to experience the country kind of because you also like your own little group. You have people
Mm.
that make the journey with you. Yeah, I feel like it's a cool way to experience the country.
I think when you're young and you're just interested in experiences like maybe skydiving or having nights out on a town, I think not having the stress of trying to figure out how to get somewhere, you just go on a bus and be hungover for a few hours. That's quite nice when you're younger. So yeah, I think if you're in your early 20s, that's a perfect way to see a country for sure.
Um, so yeah, I guess yeah, I'm gonna ask a different question because my go-to question I would have asked you about Southeast Asia because obviously that's with being in Indonesia, that's places I've visited as well, places that I
Mm.
quite love. But it's also my go-to question every time I hear that someone's been to Southeast Asia. So um, you've been to, you said 70 plus countries. So um, what would you say? And maybe we already covered it with South America, but maybe we didn't. So, what was your favorite place or maybe region, continent that you have ever visited so far?
Yeah, that's a tough
It's
one.
hard, hey.
Mm, just one. Mm. Well, I've been to Nepal twice, so I think I
Oh,
do love the Himalayas. I think as a region, and what I'd include in that is Nepal, northern India, arguably Bhutan, and parts of Pakistan. I think that region, and China, of course, as well, like Tibet region, southern China. I think that region of the Himalayas around that is pretty magical. I don't think you can quite beat staying at a nice tea house in Nepal and just walking to the next village and staying there for a bit. And you've got the Himalayas behind you, perfect sunny weather. They always offer you tea. You have dalbat twice a day, and it's just in nature, very fulfilling. I think as a region, maybe that is my favorite because I've been to Nepal twice, like I said. So I think I have to choose that.
I love that answer, and I'm glad I didn't just ask about Southeast Asia,
But as a
because
region, Southeast Asia is
Nepal.
close. As a region, it's up there. Like I've been in Southeast Asia that loop twice, so I have done it twice. I do love it, but there's just something about the mountains in the Himalayas that are pretty special.
Yeah. Because I think so far, I would say Southeast Asia and probably Thailand. For myself, I really loved Thailand. Um, but yeah, I'm also very eager to go to South America and see how my experience there will be.
Yeah,
Um, but but no, Nepal and also Tibet definitely are on my list for a long time as well. So I love that answer. And I heard Bhutan uh, put in there as well a bunch of times. So, um, how difficult is it to explore like Nepal um on your own? Oh, because I heard like especially I think more so Bhutan. I think, but I feel like it's pretty hard to experience all these things by yourself. I heard there's like guides that you need for certain things.
yeah. So Bhutan, you have to book a tour. Um, you always see people like, oh, how can I visit without a tour? You can't do it. You have to book a tour.
mm,
and I think you have to pay $100 a day in Bhutan. So there's no getting away from that fact. So you have to accept the cost of that. Nepal is interesting because we were there before the new rule. So before you can just travel to any part of Nepal just like a normal tourist, but now there is this
mm,
loose government rule where you have to have a tour guide for most areas in
um,
Nepal. It's a bit loose because it requires you trekking, but you don't have to trek in these areas. You can just go and visit. So there's a bit of grey area there, and I met people who were doing the correct way in terms of having a tour guide, and people who are not. And people who are not doing it weren't really getting checked. But that was quite early on in the new law, so maybe now it's more regulated and more checked upon. But I know there's disagreement in different areas. So, like the Everest region, don't agree with the new rule, so they're not going to enforce it. But it is a federal law, so I'm
mm,
not sure how it's going at the minute. But effectively, law is you need a guide to trek. Do you actually need a guide to trek? Like no, like Langtang Valley, you don't need a guide. Everest region, maybe because it's quite a big region and there's stuff. But in the old days, people were just trekking on their own, and you can just book as you go. You can just walk, stay in a tea house, and carry on. Right. So I'm not sure if that's possible anymore. Um, yeah, but if you like asking on your own in terms of just take the guide away, yeah, it's easy to get buses, easy to arrange hiking experiences, easy to stay in accommodations. So yeah, it's pretty easy, I'd say.
nice. And have you actually been into Tibet as well, or was it
No,
just Nepal?
yeah, just Nepal. I was on the border in Langtang Valley, but not quite in Tibet. No.
Because yeah, that's something that always interested me as well, especially the Buddhist culture that they have up there, and just
Yeah,
um, kind of feeling out the vibe in person. But I feel like, especially being part of China, and I did research on this like right during COVID, so obviously it was basically impossible then. But it seems like it's pretty hard um, to get entry into there as well.
yeah. Not as easy as it was.
Um, yeah, maybe yeah. Let's go away from specific locations. I always love to just talk about travel in general, and why people do it. So we well, I mean, I obviously had a lot of questions about specific regions. That's why we talked about it
Cool.
for as long as
Yeah,
we did, and I appreciate that. I love stories as well.
sure.
Um, but but in the end, I always find it interesting to ask people, especially people like yourself, that say, um, "Yeah, it's just the wanderlust just came, and now it's part of my life, basically." So what what does travel mean to you personally? What does it? How does it enrich your life? What are the things you get from it?
Yeah, great question. That has changed over time with age. Um, right now, I think travel is like a freedom where
Mm,
because in real life, in brackets, where you're working, paying bills, staying in one place, it's very rigid. And when you've got a job, mortgage or rent, car payments, you kind of fix to those. There's always a way out of them, but if you've got a mortgage, for example, you got to pay it. Otherwise, you got to sell your house or at least try and find someone to pay it for you. So there's all these rules,
mm,
I guess, that you have to adhere to. Whereas I feel I went traveling for a year in 2023, and it's like completely liberating. Like we quit our jobs, went for a year, and traveled to like the most amazing places, and that's just like freedom, isn't it? It's like not adhering to any rules, go where we want for any time we want, leave when we want, do what we want,
Yeah.
and have some rough idea, and that's it. So I don't think you can beat that freedom in my eyes. So I kind of a little bit addicted to that. But I'm not adverse to stationary life. Like I do love the normal life routine as well. Um, and going into my mid 30s now, I have changed the way I travel, but it's still there in terms of the motivation to see all these places and countries and amazing experiences and people, right? So I don't think it would ever go. Uh, but that now it's a question of how do I make it an ongoing thing where I don't have to quit my job all the time? And can I earn money whilst on the road? So can I integrate travel and working in one location together? So not the constant repetitive sequence of quit job, go traveling, have no money left, try and find a job. And okay, I'm a bit over that now. I think I'm trying to work out how to make it more sustainable by having my own income and also having a home base. I think that's key as well. But if that was 10 years ago, those things don't matter. Just get your job, save your money, go and try new things out, meet new people, take a risk because you won't regret it.
Yeah. Um, it was quite interesting that you did bring that up, though, because it's honestly not something that I think about yet. But yeah, I'm also not that naive to think it might not be at some point something I think about is the stationary life. And um, I feel like what you said like sums it up perfectly because it just feels like it's a lifestyle that you can really combine if we talk about, the traditional, yeah, you stay at a place and you find work at that place. And then that doesn't really combine to the lifestyle of someone that wants to travel for the majority of the year and
Mm,
or even half a year every year. That just doesn't work with a life like that. Um, so you already led us into your thoughts there a little bit, but um, do you think for yourself the best way to combine these two, like you said, is like an income that is detached from that, like from a stationary work?
um, yeah, there's different types of people who love travel in different amounts. I think we probably love it arguably the most because we think about it and do it all the time. But in real life, you're gonna have to figure out how to do that as part of your life going forwards. And I've tried and have done for 10 years the quit job thing, which is great. Don't get me wrong, learned a lot of lessons. But into my mid late 30s now, I'm thinking, well, I want to carry that on, but not always figure out the hard stuff like trying to find a job. So I'm now working on my own income with my own skills, which is predominantly laptop based, so I can be anywhere in the world, like a digital
Yeah.
nomad, for example. So I'm working on that to make sure that I can then choose at any point to go anywhere in the world and not feel bad because I have to stay and work in a job that's location dependent. And what I've learned from my year trip in 2023 is if you just, this is a personal thing and this might come to you later in life, I'm not sure, but if you just want to stop, you don't want to rent an Airbnb, you don't want to do a road trip for 3 months or live in a van, you don't want to backpack for 3 months, you just want to sit still and create a podcast for a month and just play computer games or whatever or work, I think
Mhm.
you need a home base to go back to because it could be your own space in your own home. And that's difficult because you're going to have to figure out how to pay and get that. So these are the things I'm
Yeah.
sort of talking about at the minute. Yeah. But in a weird way, this is how I think about it. If you get, in my mind, if you get your home base and your digital nomad working job, you can travel for as long as you want anywhere in the world because you have a place to go back to if you want to take a break, and you have an income where you can take with you to anywhere as long as it's got internet. So I think that gives you a lot of options going forward. So in the long run, I think it's more sustainable. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, makes makes a lot of sense too. Um, I f- I feel like maybe that isn't really part of your thoughts at all. I'm just throwing a question out there that is there in my mind, because yeah, you seem quite comfortable with where you are when you talked about Vancouver as well. But for myself, I think another question that would add to the things that you just mentioned is, well, where would that home base even be? Because having seen so many places and kind of seeing the cool things in a lot of different places, and kind of we saw when I said like what's the which admittedly is an unfair question, what's the favorite place you ever been to? You were like, just one, so for me, that comes in as well. Like, where would I even like put
Mm,
that home base?
that is a great question. Um, I'm lucky because I have a choice because I have residency here. I'm just about to get the passport for Canada, so I have a choice of either Canada or UK, realistically. Um, and UK is not my favorite place in the world, but it is a place where I consider properties to be quite cheap from where I'm from, and also
Right.
most of my friends and family in one place. So it makes sense for me to be based there in terms of a property. But that doesn't mean I'm there all year. It just means that I can be based there when I'm not traveling, basically, and just work on a few things.
Mm.
In a real ideal world, I'd have a property here and here in Vancouver and in Norwich. But that's quite a lot of money. I don't think I can commit to that because I want to travel more. So for now, it's just trying to work on being based in Norwich, maybe in 3 to 5 years' time. But that's still quite far away. It's not like tomorrow. So yeah, in the meantime, I'm more concerned about making enough income myself rather than buying a base because that gives you the ultimate freedom. Because I can just say, do you know what? I'm just going to go and work in Thailand for a month. Nothing can stop you, right? So that's more of a concern rather than trying to buy a property, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously these kind of things you really have to see them practical as well, because sometimes in my mind I just go to the ideal where I'm like, well, maybe I'll just buy a hut somewhere in Ecuador next to the beach.
Yeah.
But then you have to like these things you mentioned, like I'm not a resident there, would that even work? Like
Yeah, yeah,
so all these things you obviously have to consider, because
sure.
they definitely determine where you even can put your base and where you
Mm,
can.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, another unfair question, but do you feel like there will be a point in your life where you just like definitely stop traveling? Not the way you discussed it for a few months, but like just stop.
No, can't see it. Too many places to see and
It'll
do.
uh, great. That's
Short answer for you.
that that's no, that's perfect. That's perfect. Because that's the way I feel as well. Um, do you ever feel like there's places that you might not be able to visit. Might it be because of
Mm.
language barriers? So we discussed South America. So maybe when it comes to, I don't know of an example. I don't know, maybe parts of China be problematic. Maybe um, places in Africa. Do you think there's places that you would want to see that might it be language, might it be entry barriers that we just can't explore?
Hmm. I think for people with strong passports, so German, English, well, UK, Canada, I think there's probably 150 easy countries to travel to. And what I mean by that is there's no real admin to get in. There might be a little bit to apply for a visa, but they're safe. You can visit. You can get a tourist on arrival visa. So I reckon those 150 are possible, and then you're into the realms of probably 20 to 30 that are just going to require some patience and money and applications to go and visit. And then you got the ones at the end that are just either war zones or totally unsafe or ethically you don't agree with. So I think, yeah, it depends what your aim is. I don't really like to rule out any country, but obviously visiting certain countries right now is off limits for obvious reasons. So I think it all depends on
Right.
time and what year you're in. But yeah, I don't really rule out any country in the long term. I don't think. No, I think I enjoy the challenge too much. So you mentioned China. I'd love to go and visit China for 3
Mm.
months. Yeah, and I would learn Mandarin 100%. But imagine dotting around on those bullet trains and seeing different parts of the culture in China. That'd be incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. W- I think the reason why China was the first thing that popped in my head was a conversation that I had with a friend of mine. He's from Singapore, but he is Chinese
Mm,
Singaporean. So, and I also had a kind of an experience like that when actually flew to New Zealand here, and I flew through Doha, Qatar.
yeah.
And basically, both these instances, I realized that there's like so much culture, so much literature, so much music, so much art that we in the Western or English speaking world aren't even aware of. Because my friend from Singapore was talking about all these teachings in Chinese, and in Doha, I visited the museums and I saw all these philosophical old books in
Mm,
Arabic, and it just really opened my eyes. And it's like, well, there's this whole worlds happening that we just don't have access to because of our culture, of our language.
yeah. 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 Absolutely. It's endless. So there's so much to learn from each country. I think you can't really. Well, I don't think you can really stop if you're that interested in travel. Right? There's so much to see, learn, and do. Yeah. Endless options.
Yeah. So, um, lastly, maybe to inspire myself a little bit more, I probably won't be doing too much um, more travel than what I already like um, told you, that I'll be in Australia for the next 2 years, and then afterwards I'm gonna be in South America and Central America. Um, but I always like to keep a list with countries. So maybe if you want to tell us, because we talked about what you visited, in the future, um, what countries are still on your list? What are you keen to visit next?
How many do you want?
Well, I'll take a couple.
No, I got a huge list. I think I did this the other day on my own podcast. I think I listed out 10 places. Um, but internationally, let's do my next top 5, if you like, where I've not visited, but I just wanna go to. That's gonna be Cuba, uh, it's going to be Nicaragua, it's gonna be Norway. Not been to Norway, unbelievably.
Mm.
Um, I think I'm really interested in Philippines and probably Sri Lanka. I think they're probably in my top 5. If you want another 5 quickly off the bat, Botswana, Namibia. I'm not done much of Africa. I'd love to go to also I'd love to go to, like, Sweden and Finland, and then Colombia as well. I've not been there. So I think there's loads to go to, right? Um, but also there's places I've been to that I wanna go back to. Like, I wanna go back to Australia to do a road trip in Tasmania and Northwest Australia. That's on my list. I wanna go back to New Zealand. It's always top of my list to go back to. So yeah, there's a few places that I'm desperate to go back to. What was the other one I was thinking of the other day? New Zealand, Australia. Oh, Thailand. I really want to go back
Mm,
to. I've been there loads of times, but I want to go back there and just kind of live there for a bit. So I think there's those little things as well.
nice. Um, it was kind of a good reminder as well to hear these Northern European countries
Oh,
in there as well, because
yeah.
we have beautiful countries. And I mean, I'm in New Zealand right now, but just talking as an European, we forget, or I personally sometimes forget, that we have so many beautiful countries just right there
Yeah.
that are worth to visit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I do love road trips. So it's probably my favorite way, or train travel or road trips are my favorites. So I do have those like countries in mind. You know, the summer in Scandinavia would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? And then China train travel would be pretty cool, just dotting around the bullet train in China. Yeah, so these are like
Mm,
types of travel that I'm really interested in.
nice. Yeah, I hope that just gave a lot of people some cool ideas. Definitely get me a couple more on my list.
Awesome.
Um, all right. Well, we talked a lot already. It flew by. It didn't.
Yeah,
It
it's
definitely
great.
didn't feel like an hour and 20 minutes. Um, so before we do wrap it up, I always um want to let the people know if they enjoyed it as much as I did, as well, if they felt intrigued by the things that we talked about. Where can people find out more about you? You talked about your podcast as well. And obviously, all the links I'll put in the description as well, so people can easily access them. But yeah, where can we find?
Yep. I host a podcast called Wingin It Travel Podcast. It's part of the Voyascape network. So you can either visit voyascape.com, and then there's all the podcasts in there with that network, and mine's on there. Or you can just search for Wingin It Travel Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and my personal website is wingingittravelpodcast.com. I think that's the same handle for Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So Winging It Travel Podcast. Pop that into Google. I think I'm on there somewhere, so you should be able to find it.
Nice. Um, so yeah, thank you, James. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing these nice experiences that definitely made me more excited again to go to those places, and sharing your insights as well, letting us into your head a little bit. Um, yeah, really appreciate it. It was a very nice conversation.
Cheers, Mike. I really appreciate the invite, and good luck with your Australian travels and your work permit there as well. And I look forward to following you for your South America trip in a few years.
Cool. Thanks, man. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and bye, everyone.
Cheers.